Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back. So we've moved on from Mr. Liszt and saw his competitor and counterpart and friend, his some people call his frenemy, Frederick Chopin. Um, I started the show talking about Chopin coming to Paris to play this sensational concert at the Salle Pleyel, but he first came to, he was fairly unknown when he played that concert, but the year prior he didn't play the concert. Actually, a pianist named Julius Knorr played his variations on Mozart's La Ci darem la mano for piano and orchestra in Leipzig, and Robert Schumann attended that performance. And Schumann famously wrote, which we cut out of the show. He famously wrote in his German music magazine, "Hats off, gentlemen, a genius," and that referring to Chopin's composition. It wasn't even Chopin's playing. So when Chopin arrives in Paris for this concert, in attendance are Franz Liszt, Felix Mendelssohn, and Luigi Cherubini. To check out this young Polish superstar, and he just blew the socks off the place, and he instantly became a hit in Paris musical life, as somewhat of an exotic figure, not unlike Liszt, coming from a Central European country, not from a German capital, but. Liszt, as I said, they were competitors and they were friends, and it was, there wasn't a lot of Chopin didn't put a lot of his thoughts down in writing. He preferred to speak with people and not be a letter writer in earnest as some of his counterparts were. But when Chopin died, at a young age of tuberculosis, Liszt wrote his first biography directly after his death, and I have a passage from that biography of Liszt on Chopin. And he says, "The Polish word Saal, as if his ear thirsted for sound of this world, which expresses the whole range of emotions produced by an intense regret. Through all the shades of feeling, from hatred to repentance, he repeated it again and again. Susceptible of different regimens, it includes all the tenderness, all the humility of a regret born with resignation and without a murmur, while bowing before the fiat of necessity, the inscrutable decrees of providence, but changing its character and assuming the regimen indirect as soon as it is addressed to man. It signifies excitement, agitation, rancor, revolt full of reproach, premeditated vengeance, menace never ceasing to threaten if retaliation should ever become possible, feeding itself, meanwhile, with a bitter if sterile hatred." So Liszt goes on, he's talking about the complexity of Chopin's character, and that, Chopin sort of carried the later, the famous Teddy Roosevelt, "Speak softly but carry a big stick." Chopin was very opinionated and very complicated and very could be difficult to deal with other people. And Liszt is speaking to that, sort of a backhanded compliment and blaming it on his complicated this Zal, this Polish countenance. I have another quote from James Honecker. Does anybody know who he was or is familiar with that name? He was a very famous American writer and music critic at the turn of the 20th century. And he wrote two very big, important books, a biography of Chopin, and then the second book was basically more of the biography of Chopin, but then going in depth to all of Chopin's works. I think the second book is Chopin and His Music, written in 1900 or so. But he was quite a colorful character, as you can tell from the following passage. Liszt, despite his tendency to idealize Chopin after his death, is our most trustworthy witness at this period. Chopin was an ideal to Liszt, though he has not left us record of his defects. The Pole was ombrageux and easily offended. He disliked democracies. In fact, mankind in the bulk stunned him. This is one reason, combined with the frail physique of his inability to conquer the larger public. Thalberg could do it. His aristocratic tournure, imperturbability, beautiful touch, and polished mechanism won the suffrage of his audiences. Liszt never stooped to cajole. He came, he played, he overwhelmed. Chopin knew all this, knew his weaknesses, and fought to overcome them, but failed. Another crumpled rose leaf for this man of excessive sensibility. So he didn't have that sort of bravura personality that these others had, that Liszt especially had, and he speaks of Thalberg as well. You know, he was very just quiet and to himself, and spoke with his music making and his virtuosity. We started with the waltzes. Obviously, some of them may be familiar to you of these Chopin waltzes, but I thought it'd be interesting to examine the origins of the waltz. And it was quite interesting. I didn't realize it went back this far, but apparently in 1858, the French philosopher Montaigne reported of a dance where the couple were so close together that their faces touched. And that's referring to the basis of a waltz. But the waltz became popular in the mid 18th century, in the 1750s, around Bavaria and Austria. And it was really for peasants because it was deemed to be a bit decadent and, you know, a bit overtly sexual, the waltz. And, you know, the upper class, you know, as we saw in Haydn and Beethoven, they danced. What was the dance of the day? Anyone?
Minuet.
The minuets, yes. So the minuet was for the upper classes. And then there was this sort of tawdry dance where couples were a little bit too close on the dance floor. And that was the waltz. And, you know, Schubert wrote many waltzes, but never really intended them to be serious music. He wrote them for the salon, for people to dance at home. And, you know, so here's, you know, in this time, Chopin brings back the waltz and puts it front and center. You also have Johann Strauss, the elder Johann Strauss, who was not as famous as his son at this time. But Chopin's waltzes, they're a little bit too fast to dance to. It's not exactly a dance. And Honecker says that they're more dances of the soul rather than the body. So it gives you that sense of the soul. So we started off with the first waltz of Opus 64, the Minute Waltz. And did everybody know that it's not meant to be played in a minute? That was, you know, that's.
You did play it fast. We played it very fast.
It was, and that was a fast tempo that he took. Yes, it was a fast tempo that he took, but it still did not come near 1 minute.
No.
I believe it was closer to 2 minutes. It was maybe, I think, 1:50 or something like that. But it was published in the French Minute, and that's, you know, and that's why it just sort of latched on to the Minute Waltz. But he actually, Chopin referred to it as the waltz of the puppy, because George Sand had a small dog that was chasing its tail around. And the waltz is meant to show the puppy chasing its own tail, which I thought was rather just lovely, you know, the scent of the Minute Waltz. But yes, Bleihash's tempo was a little quick in the first waltz. But in contrast, how about the second waltz? I mean, it goes all the way back an hour ago, but can we recall the second waltz and what the character of the second waltz is? I'll sing it. Da dee da, ba-dee-um, ba-dee, ba-dee-um, ba-dee. What's the general?
Melancholy.
Melancholy. Yes, absolutely. Just he gives you the melancholy touch to the waltz, and you know, it's not who wants to have this sort of suggestive dance of a couple with the melancholy. So he adds that spice to it. But how about any other dance fans where this piece was used very famously later on in the 19th century?
Oh, Tchaikovsky. Didn't he? Didn't they
It was used.
Dance.
It was used in a ballet, Les Sylvides, which is was It was orchestrated by Glazunov and premiered by the Ballet Russe, and that's still in the repertory. That's still dance. I have to say that my ballet experience is it's not so great. So, but it's a very famous piece that's often done in the ballet. So that's the second waltz. So we go to the third waltz, and again, it's a touch melancholy, the third waltz. But interestingly enough, he only uses one melody throughout it, and just sort of messes with one melody, and it sort of meanders and goes into this stream of consciousness. What do we think of Blehash's performance in general?
Nice. Very
nice.
Nice.
Yeah. He's got a certain quality. I mean, famously, I think this was the performance where we had the jury of the Gilmore Award jury in the audience. But I find his Chopin, I mean, he won the Chopin competition, but I find it just captures the character just immediately. And I hear that he brings out voicing in his playing that I don't normally hear, which I really appreciate in his playing. But I wanted to play another waltz of a young artist actually who appeared on the series, and he was supposed to come here in December, Eric Liu. And this is actually part of his round. He was he was one of the finalists in the top 5, I believe, in the last Chopin competition. But this was his round of playing a waltz in that competition, and he's playing the waltz in A flat major, Opus 42. So let's give a watch of that here. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, have to optimize the sound. Here we go. Eric Liu in the A flat major waltz, and this was actually 4 years ago. What'd you think? Quick.
Yeah, hard to dance to that one. In fact, there were times when I couldn't even make out the the rhythm. It was so fast.
Yeah. It's only actually a touch faster than what's written. I forget what the exact thing. I did check the tempo. Yeah. Yeah. But it's so you have the melancholy, he mixes and matches the melancholy with the ebullience of these waltzes. I was going to play another melancholy waltz, but I decided, wouldn't it be interesting to hear a Liszt waltz?
Mm.
So here we go. We're going to hear the Valse Impromptu of Liszt, and a pianist, Georges Zifra. Does anybody remember him?
Did he come to Union College?
Oh no. He was a Russian French pianist. He emigrated from did I say Hungary? He was Hungarian French pianist, and he emigrated from Hungary and lived in London for most of his career. But quite a connoisseur of piano. He was active in I'd say the 50s and 60s at that height of his career. And he passed in the 90s, and I think he left the concert stage in the early 80s, actually. So, but let's give a listen to Mr. Liszt. Here we go. Yes, exactly. Okay. Here we go.
I think the sketchy website I bought.
I was curious, Derek, what year was that written composition, the list?
This was 1853.
Okay.
After Chopin had died.
Yeah. So tell me, how would you compare that? Stylistically?
More rhapsodic, less structured, I think. At least I couldn't apprehend.
I didn't pick apart the structure, but you're right. It's not a strict sort of A typical waltz. I think that's why the waltz impromptu. It could have been valse fantasy maybe, but you're right. The structure of it was definitely more free. Do you think that Liszt was influenced by Chopin?
Yes. I could hear some of the Chopin-esque influences in this waltz writing. It didn't sound like Chopin. Chopin, all you need is one measure and you can tell it's Chopin. But I was struck that I could hear the influence. I think I could hear the influence. I mean, I did hear the influence of Chopin in this writing.
I think I heard a lot of Chopin in this, with the excessive Liszt added on. He has this very short introduction before he gets into the waltz itself, and it's very Lisztian. And then once the waltz starts in the beginning, it's very I think, very Chopin. I think it sounds very much like Chopin. And then as you go further on, he'll add these Lisztian things that we've come to know, or these little flourishes, or the descending, chromatic scale going down. But the heart of it, the waltz theme itself, I really think sounds a lot like Chopin, actually. But he, Liszt, as we know, can't help himself, and he does his, virtuosic flourishes. So we move on to the Scherzi.
Just to make a comment, this is a fabulous pianist.
Yes.
Just a wonderful, wonderful performance. It's just beautiful and just right, and it had the rhythmic life to it that I didn't hear in the Lou performance of the Chopin waltz before.
I agree. And these things, Chopin is also, it comes with age as well, just like late Beethoven, these characters and qualities, they're not just notes on the page. And that's what I think, Blehash especially, it's just so characteristic of each note is just shaped in a certain way that it's just got this lilt and wondrous flavor to the waltz. But the Scherzi of Chopin are major works in his repertoire, and he sort of, as I had said in the show, I mean, the typical scherzo of the past, as a joke, which could be lighthearted and in Mendelssohn almost elfish and things. But he takes this to a very dark area, this scherzo, and he sort of reinvents it. And I have a quote here from James Honecker again about the Scherzi. He says, the Scherzi of Chopin are of his own creation. The type as illustrated by Beethoven and Mendelssohn had no meaning for him. Whether in earnest or serious jest, Chopin pitched on a title that is widely misleading when the content is considered. The Beethoven scherzo is full of a robust sort of humor. The demonical element, the fierce jollity that mocks itself, the almost titanic anger of Chopin would not have been regarded by the composer of the Eroica Symphony as adapted to the form. The Pole practically built up a new musical structure, boldly calling it a scherzo, and poured into its elastic mold most disturbing and incomparable music. So he really takes the scherzo in another direction, and there is this anger and demonic energy in these scherzi, sort of alluding back to the earlier Liszt quotes in his biography of what was bubbling underneath, Chopin's personality. So you got the first scherzo, which Schumann had the quote about the dark veils of the scherzo. And it's very fiery and demonic. And then he goes to the B section, and he uses a Polish carol called "Sleep Little Jesus" as a basis for the trio section of the scherzo. And I wanted to take a look at the score of that, just the trio section. Can we see? Somehow I have a Word document up there. Here we go. So, are we there? We see it? So Chopin, he uses this a lot in his music, where he takes a very, very simple tune and then colors it all around the tune with all of these other notes and colors. So I've highlighted here, we're starting in B major, and basically the tune is just this simple tune here with the da 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 dee dee da dee da. But you see, he's got the rolling chords here, and then there's these eighth note jumps here. But if you just follow this, it's just straight quarter notes that go all the way through here, all the way through here. And then he gets to the second theme of the trio, and he separates it out. Now it just goes in the soprano voice in the right hand. He keeps the melody here, and then all of the accompaniment beneath it. So he's changing the color of the sound of the tune as it's going on. So we go through here, and this is, I'm sorry, this, yes. This goes through here and back to the theme again. And again, I didn't highlight all of them, but here's the tune again. Da, 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 dee, dee, da, da. And he goes through, and then he goes to the second theme again. He flips it. He goes into the right hand here and continues on. And I wanted to show, normally at the end of a trio section of a waltz or a scherzo or a minuet, it goes da capo. Does anybody know what da capo means?
To the top.
To the head, literally. So it goes back to the beginning. So normally here, it would go back to the beginning, but here he has the loud chord that we hear in the opening of the piece, but then he gives you the hints of the trio section here, and then the second big chord, and then again, a little whisper of the trio, and then back to the fast tempo of the opening. Let's listen to it while we're looking at the music. And I want you to just follow the tune. I'll just listen to the tune, latch on with your ears to the tune, but then hear all of the notes around it that are coloring it, above it and below it. This is and Chopin uses this technique often in his writing. So here we go. so you see that the tune itself is very, very simple, and he keeps it in the middle register and then has all of the color happening around the tune.
Who was the pianist there, Derek?
That was Maniacs. Sorry, that was Maniacs from tonight. And he repeated that section. Chopin does that often. If you just listen, there's a simple tune that's happening, and then all of this other stuff that's going on around it. It's really, really, really wonderful. And you see how just it's such a beautiful little trio, and how it contrasts the fury of the A material in this particular scherzo. So that was the B minor scherzo. The second scherzo is B flat minor. And it's sort of a question and answer where it starts very quietly murmuring and then a response in the right hand. And a student of Chopin said, for Chopin, it was never questioning enough, never soft enough, never vaulted tomb-like enough. It must be a charnel house. So very, very dark and very, very mysterious for the second scherzo. And then the third scherzo, I talk of the trip to Majorca with George Sand, and it was a disaster. And actually, George Sand referred to it as a complete disaster, that trip, because they were staying in this cold and wet monastery, and it exacerbated his tuberculosis. And Chopin became quite ill after that trip and had to recuperate. I believe they returned to France after that. But it was a very idyllic setting, and yet this is, that has a darkness to the C sharp minor scherzo as well. But interestingly, the last scherzo, the fourth scherzo, is the only one in major, and it's the shortest one, and it's very, very calm and quiet in nature. It's a very interesting way to close his chapter on the Scherzi, on the fourth Scherzi. What do we think of Manny's performance tonight? Great. So this was all, it was hard for me to do this show because he did them all in one shot, in one concert. And it was so backloaded, there was so much time spent on the Scherzi that I couldn't just keep it in the second half of the show. So I had to separate it out through intermission. So I had to deal with them as four separate pieces. But Manny is, somebody asked, well, he plays more things than Chopin. Well, of course, yes, he plays all sorts of repertoire. But his Chopin, he was in that Chopin competition. I've mentioned this in 1970. The very famous Chopin competition, and an American won that competition. Does anybody remember who that was?
70. Was it Garrick Olson?
Garrick Olson. We talked about, thank you. Yes, Garrick Olson won that Chopin competition. And second place was a pianist that comes to the series, Mitsuko Uchida.
Oh.
And Manny, I think, placed 5th or 6th in that competition, but it turned out okay for him.
Yeah.
He's had a pretty good career. So, so Chopin and Manny, he's been long associated with Chopin, and he oftentimes comes back to it. But we did feature him prominently as well on the Liszt shows. But Chopin, again, we're running out of time, but Chopin really shifted the interpretation of a scherzo from that point forward. Can anybody name? Well, no, I won't go there. But I think the most prominent example of a scherzo that's not very scherzo-like in the 19th century is in Brahms in the Second Piano Concerto. It's very, very angry and tempestuous, that scherzo. And so he really, why he called it scherzo, it's interesting. I think it just really, he stuck to the form of a scherzo, but really not the character of a scherzo. we have any other further thoughts on tonight?
It's a great program. It was very well. I like the flow and the teaching aspect of it. I learned a lot.
Great. I appreciate that's
Remember,
the idea. That's the idea. These, these Chopin shows, I've been largely doing things chronologically in general terms in these shows. And this in Chopin, it's hard because it's so compressed, his life and everything, and it was easier and I think more comprehensive to group them in the types of the pieces that we're looking at. So that's why Chopin is structured that way. So
you're going to do you're doing 4 programs?
4 programs this month of Chopin. And then we'll do a little bit of Rachmaninoff. Yeah, we don't have much Rachmaninoff, but I think we have enough for maybe 2 or 3 shows. So we'll see.
Great.
Keeping it in the virtuoso composer vein. So, any other thoughts? Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Very good.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
Bye,
Stay
everyone.
safe. Stay out of the snow.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, so long, everybody.
So long.
Bye-bye.